Hey guys, tonight we sail back to the gritty, groaning bowels of the age of exploration, where oceans stretched endlessly, hope smelled like fish guts, and the word adventure was just a fancy excuse for slow, uncomfortable suffering. You're going to be a sailor. Congratulations. You've just made the worst decision of your short, soon-to-be scab-covered life. Now, you may be picturing wind in your hair, parrots on your shoulder, and exotic islands just begging to be discovered. But let's put that idea gently in a burlap sack and toss it overboard. You're not Columbus. You're not even Columbus's assistant's assistant. You're a deckhand, a disposable body with one job. Survive long enough to scrub the same plank 75 times a day while wondering if that rumbling underfoot is hunger or the ship falling apart. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm always curious who else can't sleep at 3 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You didn't plan to become a sailor. No one ever really does. But there you are, standing in a dusty alley near the docks, squinting into the salty morning haze, staring at a man with a shiny hat and too many teeth in the wrong places. He calls himself a recruiter. You call him sketchy. He tells you the king needs brave men for a noble voyage to the edge of the known world. Glory, gold, and God, he says, it'll be an honor. And you, with your empty stomach and worse prospects, start to believe him. He says they'll feed you, give you a bunk, maybe even a cut of the treasure. You nod too fast. He claps your back and tells you to report before dawn. There's no contract, no training, just a name scribbled on a list next to 40 others. And now you're one of them. A sailor. You imagine flags snapping in the breeze, tails spun in ale-soaked taverns, and maybe, just maybe, an escape from the bleak sameness of landlocked poverty. But you're about to learn something every sailor learns far too late. The sea doesn't want you. It tolerates you, barely, and only so long as you stay useful. Your first sight of the ship is not encouraging. It leans slightly, like it's already tired. The hull creaks even at rest, and the planks are uneven, weather-worn, and suspiciously stained. A rat scurries down the gangplank as if fleeing a sinking fate, and you wonder briefly if it knows something you don't. The ship's name is something hopeful like the Saint Maria of Providence, though the crew mostly just calls it her and curses her under their breath. You climb aboard, and the smell hits first. It's an ancient bouquet: mold, tar, salt, sweat, fish rot, and something earthy that's probably human. You wrinkle your nose, but this is home now. The deck is chaos. Men haul ropes, bark orders, and bicker in at least 6 different dialects. Someone sneezes violently into a barrel. No one flinches. Your guide, a wiry man named Jock with no visible eyebrows, points to a hammock the width of a coffin and says that's yours. It's slung beneath a beam low enough to scalp you if you sit up too fast. There's no privacy. No loque, no pilo. You stow your pathetic satchel and try to look like you belong. The captain makes his appearance just before sunset. He's tall, stiff-backed, and doesn't blink nearly enough. You catch his gaze once and immediately look away. This is a man who's buried crew members for less. He doesn't shout. He whispers. Orders ripple across the deck like cold wind, and no one questions them. He says you're sailing at dawn, and that if you're late, you'll be left behind or thrown overboard, whichever's faster. You believe him. As the sun sinks, the air grows colder, and the sea turns dark and endless. You lie in your hammock, try not to think about the fact that your feet are already damp and there's something squishy beneath your left leg. You tell yourself it's just the ship settling. But the truth is, you're not sure if you'll ever feel dry again. Still, you try to sleep. Above you, ropes creak, sails flap, and someone coughs like they're dying slowly. You remind yourself, this is just the beginning. Historians still wonder how many men were recruited like this, promised wonders and shackled to floating coffins. No one kept exact records of the common sailor, because no one really cared. You weren't an explorer. You weren't a mapmaker or a noble. You were ballast with hands. If you drowned, they'd probably just write "lost at sea" and keep sailing. Still, one widely accepted fact is that European maritime powers in the 15th and 16th centuries needed these desperate men. Without their bodies, often young, often poor, often criminal, the great voyages of exploration never would have happened. And here's a fun, lesser-known detail. Many sailors couldn't swim. Yeah, you're on a ship for months, surrounded by ocean, and if you fall in, well, you just hope someone likes you enough to throw a rope. Spoiler, they won't. The wind rises sometime around midnight. It winds through the rigging like a choir of ghosts. You shift in your hammock, cold and sore, your head aching from the rocking. The ship hasn't even left port yet, but it already feels alive, groaning, twitching, breathing. You think about the recruiter and his shiny lies. You wonder how many times he's given that same speech. You wonder if he even remembers your face. But it doesn't matter now. You're here, signed, stowed, and sailing into a future that smells like brine and boiled cabbage. The only way out is forward. It's morning, and the sun doesn't so much rise as reluctantly ooze over the horizon, painting everything in a sickly gold haze that highlights every splinter, every rust-colored stain, and every miserable inch of your floating prison. You wake up sore, damp, and vaguely sticky, which is impressive considering you don't remember sweating. You try to shake the fog from your brain, but it clings like the sour stink of bilge water that's now become your permanent cologne. Welcome to the St. Maria of Providence, though at this point, Providence feels more like an ironic joke than a blessing. The ship rocks gently at dock, creaking like an old man's joints, and you try not to imagine how much worse it'll get once she actually starts moving. You make your way up to the deck, hoping for fresh air, but what greets you is something more fermented. The smell is everywhere, impossible to pinpoint, but always present. A cloying mix of rotting fish, sun-baked salt, moldy rope, foot sweat, and the occasional whiff of unidentifiable meat product that may or may not still be alive. It's in your nose, your clothes, your skin, your soul. It's like the ship itself is exhaling. It's been holding its breath since the last voyage. You cough and gag and blink against the briny wind, but there's no escape. This scent will follow you. It will haunt your dreams. You will think you've gotten used to it, and then one day you'll bite into a crust of bread and taste it all over again. One sailor laughs when you gag and says, "It ain't the ship that stinks, it's us." And you suddenly understand a deep truth. You don't board a ship in the age of exploration. You become part of it. The stench, the filth, the grind. It fuses with you like barnacles on a hull. Every inch of this vessel is coated in a thin, oily film of grime, sweat, and despair. The wood is permanently damp. Not wet, exactly, just moist in a way that makes you nervous to touch anything for too long. Ropes hang like tangled intestines from the masts, and every knot you brush against seems to leave behind some sticky, fibrous residue. The sails overhead flap weakly, already yellowed and patched like ancient, dying skin. Below deck, things are worse. Much worse. It's darker than it should be, claustrophobic, damp, and full of noises that don't match anything you can see. You hear sloshing water, even when the floor seems dry. You hear scratching, always scratching. And above all, you hear people coughing. A wet, hacking cough that sounds like it's been passed down from one voyage to the next. You step over a man passed out in a puddle that might be urine or seawater or a mix of both, and try to breathe through your mouth. It doesn't help. You still taste it. Historians have written a lot about the adventures of explorers, but they rarely describe what ships actually smelled like. Probably because there aren't words quite terrible enough. A widely accepted historical fact is that sailors often went weeks, sometimes months, without a single proper bath. Not out of laziness, but because clean water was precious and soap was seen as a luxury for land dwellers. Washing yourself in salt water was possible, but risky. Not only did it dry your skin until it cracked, but if the ship was moving fast or the tide was wrong, bathing could very quickly become drowning. The result? You, your crewmates, your clothes, and even your food all shared the same musky, salty, foot-forward aroma. And if that wasn't enough, here's a lesser-known detail. Sailors sometimes rubbed vinegar or strong alcohol onto their skin, not to clean themselves, but to mask the smell. Let that sink in. You stank so bad, you marinated yourself in spirits just to cope. And it barely worked. You try to distract yourself by exploring, though exploring here means ducking through tight passageways filled with barrels, crates, and sleeping men who do not like being stepped on. Everything feels too close. The walls groan with every wave, and the floor shifts beneath your feet like it's got a grudge. You find the galley, if you can call it that, a cramped space with a blackened stove and a cook who looks like he's been chewing tobacco since birth. He grunts at you and throws a chunk of something beige into a pot. It smells faintly of old socks and despair. You move on. Next is the crew quarters, though technically you've already seen them. Your hammock hangs with a few dozen others like meat in a smokehouse. There is no privacy. None. Someone is always snoring, scratching, muttering, or worse. And above you, the rats. Always the rats. You see one now, fat, smug, and completely unafraid. It stares at you from atop a barrel, like it's daring you to challenge its authority. You don't. You've already lost this turf war. The day drags on. You're given tasks, none of which make sense, all of which involve lifting something too heavy or pulling something too tight. You burn your palms on a rope. You bang your head on beams. You spill water, you're scolded, you nearly trip over a bucket of eel heads, and you find yourself deeply, profoundly exhausted after just a few hours. The sea hasn't even gotten rough yet. One crewmate warns you. This is the easy part, and you laugh, thinking he's joking. He is not. You sit on a crate for a moment, try not to cry from sheer sensory overload, when a grizzled sailor sits next to you and begins cleaning his teeth with what looks like a fish bone. You ask him, "Why does it smell so bad?" He shrugs and says, "Because no one leaves. The ship's alive. It remembers everything." You want to dismiss it as nonsense, but when you walk away, the floorboards creak in a way that sounds eerily like laughter. The truth is, the ship was never designed for comfort. These vessels, caravels, carracks, flights, were built for cargo, not people. Humans were cargo too, in a way. You were shoved wherever there was space, curled around barrels of dried meat, bundles of rope, and the occasional cannonball. And even when you weren't touching anything disgusting, the very air was a biohazard. Mold bloomed in the corners. Fleas jumped ship from rat to man and back again. You scratch the back of your neck and feel something squish under your nails. You do not look. Instead, you stare out at the harbor and think longingly of fresh grass, clean wind, and that one public well where the water didn't taste like coins. It's strange how fast you start to miss things, simple things. Blankets that weren't damp, bread that wasn't hard, space to breathe. Historians still argue over whether sailors became nose blind to the smells or if they simply learned to ignore them. Maybe it's both. Maybe the human body adapts in weird ways when survival depends on it. But one thing is certain, this wasn't romantic. This wasn't glorious. This was a tight, wheezing, sloshing wooden box that reeked of rot and ambition, and you were part of it now. Every fiber of your being soaked in salt and suffering. You lean against the railing, trying to find a breeze that doesn't carry the stink, and think, how long until I forget what clean smells like? No one answers. The ship just creaks, breathes, and lurches gently beneath your feet, as if warning you that you've only just begun. You're halfway through your second day aboard, and whatever faint glimmer of hope you had that things might improve has been thoroughly extinguished by rope burn, rat bites, and the realization that personal space is not just non-existent. It's a myth someone made up for land dwellers. You're wedged between bodies almost constantly, pressed shoulder to shoulder, elbow to gut, with men who smell like wet burlap and snore like haunted bellows. You've come to recognize people more by their odor than their faces. That's Pedro, who smells like smoked fish. That's William, who always seems to be leaking some sort of sticky substance. And that's Peter, who hums to himself while trimming his toenails with a knife he keeps in his sock. No one cares. Manners were lost somewhere back on the docks. What you're quickly learning is that your new companions are less crew and more a chaotic swirl of half-mad survivalists held together by superstition, spit, and shared misery. The day starts with the ship's bell and a bark command to get moving, though the sun hasn't fully risen and you can still see stars shivering faintly in the sky. You scramble to your feet, barely dodging a boot swinging in someone's sleep, and begin the daily routine of pretending you know what you're doing while hoping no one notices that you don't. Your first task? Coiling rope. Simple, right? Wrong. The rope is wet, rough, and frayed in places sharp enough to cut your hands if you grip too hard. Which of course you do. The salt from the sea air stings the fresh blisters instantly, and your palms feel like they've been sandpapered by a particularly angry ghost. You wince, but the sailor next to you, a barrel-chested man with 3 teeth and no eyebrows, just chuckles and mutters. She's giving you your welcome handshake. She, of course, being the ship, which many of the crews seem to treat like a sentient being. You try to laugh back, but it comes out like a squeak, and the man returns to tying knots with the quiet efficiency of someone who's probably lost fingers doing it. Ropes aren't just everywhere. They are everything. They hang like vines, coil like snakes, whip through the air, and tangle around your ankles when you're not looking. They control the sails, secure the cargo, and occasionally serve as hammocks, belts, or makeshift leashes for men too drunk to walk. You learn fast that ropes are sacred, and each knot has a name and purpose. There's a clove hitch, the bowline, the reef knot, all of which sound like drinks but are far less enjoyable. Mess up a knot, and the whole sail could collapse. Or worse, someone could fall. You try not to think about that as you fumble your way through your assigned duties, hands raw, knees bruised, ego fully dismantled. Just when you think you're getting the hang of things, you're handed a bucket and pointed toward a smear of something ominous on the deck. The officer grunts, "Swab it." That's right, you're officially swabbing the deck. With salt water and a mop that looks like it survived a war. The smear might be fish guts, might be vomit, might be the final remains of your dignity. Doesn't matter. It's your problem now. You scrub in a circle, knees creaking, back aching, while trying to avoid eye contact with the rats scampering around like they own the place, which, to be fair, they do. The rats are everywhere. You hear them at night, skittering over your hammock ropes, whispering secret rat plans in the dark. One jumps on your chest while you're dozing, and you shriek like a banshee, earning a round of laughter from nearby crew. "He picked you," someone says ominously. You don't know what that means, and you don't want to. You're told they chew through bags, ruin supplies, spread disease, and occasionally bite a toe off. But no one bothers trying to get rid of them. They're like little hairy crewmates with better instincts and sharper teeth. Historians agree that ships in this era were plagued, literally and figuratively, by rats. The vessels were floating buffets of grain, salted meat, and hiding spots, and rats thrived in the chaos. But here's a lesser-known detail. Some ships actually encouraged a few rats to stay aboard. Not out of affection, but because they could sense when the ship was taking on water. If the rats suddenly started fleeing, it was often the first and only sign that you were about to sink. So yeah, you now keep a mental list of which rats you've seen today, just in case they all disappear tomorrow. You're midway through untangling another mess of rigging, your fingers trembling from exhaustion and splinters, when a fight breaks out on the other side of the deck. 2 sailors screaming, one bleeding from the forehead, the other waving a rusted fork like a sword. No one seems particularly shocked. The boatswain shouts something unintelligible and flings a wet boot at them. The fork man is tackled, the bleeding one is laughed at, and someone else picks up the drop hardtack and eats it without flinching. You glance around, hoping for some sign that anyone finds this abnormal, but instead, you're handed a new coil of rope and told to get on with it. This is life now. Chaos, knots, and the constant sensation that you're one splinter away from losing your mind. And always the stink. It's in the ropes too. You pull one close and realize it smells like dried fish and something fermented, possibly regret. At some point, you're told to haul cargo from the lower hold. You descend a rickety ladder into a space barely tall enough to crouch in, and the darkness down there feels thick and wet. The air smells of damp wood and spoiled lard. You squint in the gloom and start dragging barrels upward. Barrels that may contain anything from salted pork to cannon shot to mysterious things that slosh and whisper when moved. You slip once and bang your shin, so hard your vision sparks, and you hear someone above laugh and shout, "Careful, she bites." Again with the she. You realize the ship is the only woman aboard, and she is not kind. You spend hours down there, sweat soaking your back, splinters in your thighs, hands numb. When you finally emerge, blinking against the light, you feel 10 pounds lighter and 100 years older. Someone hands you a ladle of something hot and gray. It tastes like wet wool. You eat it anyway. A widely accepted historical fact. Sailors in this era were often pressed into service with little to no training. They learned by doing, and usually by doing it wrong the first time. Injuries were common, fatal accidents frequent, and discipline was swift and brutal. The rope you just burned your hands on? If you'd let go of it too soon, someone might have fallen from the mast. That mistake could get you flogged. Or worse. But here's the thing no one really tells you. Mistakes are inevitable. Everyone screws up. The trick is to screw up in ways that don't kill anyone important. Or at least, not in public. A lesser-known detail, new sailors were sometimes called lubbers, a term that basically means land idiot. You're a lubber, and you will be until you either survive long enough to earn some grudging respect or get tossed overboard during a storm and quietly replaced. By the time the sky turns red-orange and the sun dips low, you are covered in salt, sweat, and at least 3 types of grime. Your muscles ache in ways you didn't know they could. Your hands are raw. Your feet stink. You can feel a bruise forming on your hip from where a barrel rolled into you, and you're pretty sure something bit you behind the knee. You slump against the side rail, watching the water lap against the hull, and for a moment, it's almost peaceful. Then a rat climbs up next to you, sniffs your boot, and urinates on the rail. You sigh and mutter, same, under your breath. The stars start to come out, pinpricks in the velvet sky, and you hear the low murmur of the crew settling into evening grumbles. You think of home, of dirt paths and warm bread in beds that didn't swing with the tide. You wonder if you'll ever see them again. You wonder how long until this all feels normal. And then a creak, a lurch, a splash, and a sudden shout from the rigging. A man's gone overboard. No one even stops eating. Just another day, another sailor swallowed by the sea. The ship sails on, the ropes groan, and you sit very, very still. Try not to imagine how easy it is to disappear out here. You don't meet the captain so much as survive his presence. And even that feels like a small miracle. He emerges rarely, like some mythical sea beast summoned only when something breaks, burns, or bleeds. And every time he appears, it's as if the air itself tightens. He's tall, skeletal, wrapped in a long coat that flaps in the wind like torn parchment, and his face is the kind that looks like it hasn't smiled in years. Not because he's forgotten how, but because smiling feels beneath him. His eyes are pale, unsettling, like sea glass that's been staring too long into storms. And when they meet yours, your body instinctively tries to shrink. You quickly learn that eye contact is a kind of challenge, and challenges are not tolerated. The first time you glance up by mistake, he stops mid-sentence, walks slowly across the deck toward you, his boots silent, his coat rustling, and says in a voice low enough to be mistaken for the ship's groan, "Something wrong, boy?" You shake your head, heart pounding, ears ringing, and drop your gaze so hard it nearly snaps your neck. He stares a moment longer, then turns and vanishes back below deck, leaving behind the strong smell of pipe smoke and cold terror. One sailor leans over and mutters, "Best learn to stare at your boots." And you do, because the alternative feels like inviting death with eye contact. See, the captain doesn't shout, doesn't flail, doesn't even raise his voice above a whisper. But when he speaks, grown men straighten like rigging lines and rats scatter like cannonballs just fell. He's an ex-naval man, you're told, or maybe a pirate who cleaned up. No one's quite sure. Some say he slit a mutineer's throat mid-supper and kept eating. Others say he once sailed straight into a storm to teach the sea manners. The truth, as always, is somewhere between legend and horror story, but it's clear he's not someone you want to disappoint. Ever. His quarters are off limits to the crew, hidden behind a thick, ironclad door at the stern that groans open only for him, and maybe one loyal officer who's either too brave or too stupid to flinch around him. You catch glimpses sometimes. Dark wood walls, nautical charts, a shelf lined with dusty books, and a strange object wrapped in velvet that looks vaguely like a skull. No one talks about it. No one wants to. He sleeps during the day sometimes, appears at night like a ghost, inspecting the deck by lantern light, saying nothing, touching nothing, just watching. And when he does speak, it's always something deeply unsettling, like check the ropes. They're listening tonight, or make sure the bilge rats are quiet. I don't want them repeating our course. You want to believe it's a joke, but his face never changes, and you wonder, just briefly, if he's entirely human. The bosun, a man who once bit through a chicken bone like it was candy, says the captain reads the stars like they're writing him letters. He says the captain knows when storms are coming because he smells the copper in the clouds. You roll your eyes, privately, of course, but after one particularly calm night, when a captain orders the sails pulled in and the crew to brace, a monstrous storm rolls in exactly 40 minutes later, and suddenly you're not so sure he doesn't have an understanding with the sea. You start to pick up on the unspoken rules of surviving under his command. Never walk too loud above his quarters. Never leave a rope uncoiled. Never mention his left hand, which is always gloved and rumored to have been burned in a fire or replaced entirely. And absolutely never ask why the ship's nameplate was freshly painted, covering what looks like a different name underneath. These things are not your concern. Your concern is staying alive, doing your job, and not drawing attention. But that's easier said than done, especially when the captain starts selecting crewmates for mysterious watch duties that no one can quite explain. One by one, men are called to his quarters and return pale, tight-lipped, and very, very quiet. One refuses to speak afterward at all. Another jumps overboard 3 days later during a calm breakfast. No note, just gone. When you ask what's going on, a fellow sailor shrugs and says, he sees something in him. He sees through us. You laugh nervously, but no one else does. It's hard to tell where fear ends and respect begins on this ship. But whatever it is, it keeps the crew in line better than any whip. The captain doesn't need violence. He is violence. Controlled, contained, and constantly vibrating just below the surface. There's a story you hear one night in the dark from a man who only has 4 fingers on his left hand. He says, once, during a voyage around the Cape, a mutiny broke out. A dozen men tried to take the ship, slit the throats of the loyalists, and lock the captain below. They thought they'd won. But then the captain appeared on the main deck, alone, soaked in blood that didn't seem to be his, and asked them one question: which one of you is ready to steer this into hell? No one answered. He threw 3 of them overboard, lashed 2 to the mast during a lightning storm, and the rest just vanished. When you ask what happened next, the man just says, "We never made port." Don't ask again. He rolls over and goes to sleep. You lie there, eyes wide, wondering if the captain is cursed, blessed, or just utterly broken. Historians still debate what type of men led these voyages. Were they geniuses or madmen? Visionaries or tyrants? Some captains left behind journals filled with intricate calculations and poetry. Others left behind only burned ships and muttered warnings. But a widely accepted fact is this: discipline was everything. Out here, where wind and waves ruled and chaos was just a storm away, the only way to keep order was through fear. And fear, it turns out, is more effective than any chain. Here's a lesser-known detail. Some captains, especially those sailing under exploration charters, carried sealed letters from kings and queens, letters of authority, known as letters patent, which allowed them to make decisions with godlike finality. That meant they could declare new territories, execute men without trial, and rewrite the rules whenever they pleased. Your captain has one. You've seen it. An ornate scroll with gold ribbon, sealed in wax and tucked in a steel box chained to his desk. It glows with dangerous authority. If he wanted to, he could leave you on an island and call it exile, or change the course entirely and declare mutiny on the wind. And no one would stop him, because out here he is the crown. He is the law. The only thing more frightening than that, the idea that he might not care about the law at all. Still, in strange moments, quiet ones, you wonder if he's more than just menace. Once, late at night, you catch him standing at the bow, whispering to the sea. Not commands, not threats, but something gentler, like apology. You don't dare get close, but it lingers with you. The idea that maybe he wasn't always this way. Maybe the sea took something from him, too. Maybe everyone leaves something behind when they go this far from shore. Some part of themselves they'll never get back. You think about the captain's eyes, distant and hollow, and the way he never touches the railings without gloves. You think about the skull wrapped in velvet, and you wonder, just for a second, if he's as trapped as the rest of you. The moment land disappears behind you and the world becomes nothing but sky and ocean, something deep inside your stomach shifts. And it's not just the waves. It's a sudden, overwhelming realization that you're now at the mercy of forces far greater than yourself, with no way to quit, no way to run, and no way to fake your way out of the fact that you're not made for this. The dock is a memory. The coastline vanishes like it was never there, swallowed by fog and distance. And all that's left is this endless, undulating horizon. You try to stay busy, coiling ropes, swabbing decks, nodding furiously anytime someone gives you instructions. But none of it distracts you from the rising nausea building inside you like a storm. At first, you think it's nerves. Then you realize it's something deeper, more primal. The boat rocks gently, and then not so gently. Your knees wobble. Your vision swims. Someone nearby chuckles and says, "There it is." You open your mouth to ask what he means, but what comes out is not a sentence. It's a flood. You retch violently over the side, stomach clenching like it's trying to fold in on itself, and the crew doesn't even flinch. One man claps you on the back hard enough to dislodge your soul and shouts, "Welcome to the sea, lad." Your eyes water, your throat burns, and you feel like your insides just tried to escape. The worst part? It doesn't stop. For hours. The boat keeps rocking. Your body keeps rejecting the concept of movement, and you quickly discover that there's no such thing as dignity at sea, only degrees of suffering. You throw up in a bucket. You throw up in your sleeve. You throw up in the dark while trying to scrub the deck, and someone slips on it and curses you out. You can't even apologize because you're too busy dry heaving and praying for death. Your head pounds, your belly rolls, and every breath feels like a dare. It's not just seasickness. It's a personal vendetta between you and the ocean. Eventually, the crew starts placing bets on how long you'll last. Someone gives you a week. Someone else says 3 days tops. You laugh weakly, then throw up again. A rat watches you from a coil of rope and seems deeply unimpressed. It doesn't help that everything smells worse when you're nauseous. Rope, sweat, oil, bilge water, salted meat that's been sweating in barrels since the last voyage, and that faint but unmistakable scent of someone's infected toe. The sea air, which you thought would be fresh and cleansing, is sharp and briny and full of strange notes you can't quite place, like kelp, mold, and old regrets. You try to sit down to get your balance, but the deck pitches again and you fall flat, face first into a puddle of seawater that might have also had fish guts in it. No one helps you up. They're too busy laughing. You lie there for a moment, breathing through your mouth, wondering if you can vomit from both ends at once. The answer, tragically, is yes. You spend the rest of the day clutching a post, eyes wide, mouth dry, trembling like a leaf in a storm. Night doesn't bring relief. Only colder winds and the added indignity of trying to sleep in a swaying hammock while your stomach continues to do somersaults. There's no remedy. Some of the older sailors swear by chewing on hardtack until your jaw locks. Others suggest tying a leather strap around your wrist to trick the blood. One lunatic rubs lard behind his ears and claims it grounds the inner ear. Nothing works. You're a prisoner of your own equilibrium, and it's revolting against you with every sway of the mast. Historians still debate whether sailors eventually developed a tolerance or simply suffered in silence. Some journals mention men vomiting for weeks before they adjusted. Others never adjusted at all and simply wasted away into pale, shivering ghosts. You start to believe you're in the second group. You consider asking the captain to let you die with dignity, but he'd probably just hand you a mop and tell you to clean up your own corpse. A widely accepted fact is that seasickness wasn't just a nuisance, it could be deadly. Dehydration, weakness, infection, even falling overboard during a bout of retching, all genuine hazards. And here's a lesser-known tidbit to truly lift your spirits. In some cases, seasick sailors were strapped to masts or posts just to keep them from crawling overboard and ending it themselves. You briefly consider this option and decide you're not quite ready to beg for rope. Somewhere around day 4, you start to hallucinate slightly. The sky swirls in a way that feels personal. The stars mock you. The sun pulses like a migraine. You sit with your back to a barrel, mouth dry as dust, and watch the waves for hours, hoping the motion will eventually hypnotize you into acceptance. The sea is beautiful, you suppose, if you're into vast, indifferent death traps. It stretches out in every direction, sparkling and endless, broken only by the occasional seabird or, once, the shape of a whale's back rising silently before sinking again like a forgotten memory. The ship creaks and moans, wood complaining against wind, and the sails snap overhead like judgmental flags. You finally manage to keep down a few bites of dry biscuit that's only partially infested with weevils. It feels like a victory. You even smile. Then you smell someone nearby sharpening a fish knife and vomit into your shirt. So it goes. At night, the sky opens up, and for the first time, you understand why poets wax romantic about the stars. Out here, with no lanterns and no firelight, the stars look close enough to grab. The sky is so black it feels like falling, and the constellations pulse above like riddles. You lie in your hammock, finally too weak to be nauseous, and let the rocking of the ship lull you into a strange half-sleep. You dream of falling, not overboard, just falling, into clouds, into sky, into yourself. You wake with your face pressed to damp canvas and your stomach doing that now familiar roll. But for a few hours, you weren't completely miserable. That counts for something. On deck the next morning, you're handed a job that requires very little motion, peeling barnacles off the side of a barrel. You kneel, grateful for stillness, and try to ignore the popping sounds they make. A few sailors glance your way and nod slightly. One even offers you a sip of watered wine. It's the closest thing to kindness you've received so far. You sip. It tastes like vinegar and wood, but it stays down. You almost cry from gratitude. It's not that you've gotten better. It's that your body has given up the will to rebel. You're not cured. You're just numb. And weirdly, that's enough. You notice that you can look at the waves now without immediately vomiting. You can walk without clinging to every mast. You've earned your sea legs, or at least rented them. And with that, you become a little more like the others, bent, salty, grimy, but standing. Historians still wonder whether sailors truly adjusted or simply developed a permanent tolerance, like someone learning to sleep on nails. Probably both. A sailor's body was forced into submission by hunger, fatigue, and exposure until it simply stopped complaining. And now that you're on the other side of it, you understand why they all laughed. It wasn't cruelty, it was memory. They saw themselves in you. The weak-kneed, bile-covered, half-conscious mess crawling across the deck. You were just a rite of passage, an echo, and now you belong here, too. Welcome to the sea. It's still trying to kill you, but now at least you can hold a bucket and curse about it with the rest of them. You begin to notice that time behaves strangely out here. It stretches and loops and collapses in on itself like the waves you now watch with equal parts fear and familiarity. It's as if the ocean has no concept of hours or days, only moods. One moment the sea is calm and sparkling like glass. The next, it's whipped into a tantrum of foamy peaks and howling wind. And while your stomach may have made a shaky truce with emotion, the rest of your body is constantly in negotiation with exhaustion. Sleep becomes more like slipping in and out of semi-consciousness, brief, fragile moments where you're not actively working, cleaning, climbing, or dodging things that can fall, break, bite, or burn you. You start to move on instinct, reacting to the sounds of shouted orders, flapping sails, and cracking wood without even thinking. You haul ropes, scrub planks, retie knots you still don't fully understand, and lug water barrels up from the hold. All while your joints scream and your palms look like the ocean's been trying to erase your fingerprints. The only breaks you get are the moments between tasks when you lean against the mast and stare at the horizon, half hoping to see something, anything, that isn't more water. But it's always water. You wonder if land is just a collective hallucination sailors have, like a distant fever dream they all pretend is real to keep from unraveling. And it's in one of these days pauses that you start to really notice how the hierarchy on the ship works. Not just who's in charge, but how each person fits into a strange, floating machine powered by muscle, fear, and very strong opinions about knots. At the top, obviously, is the captain, a god in boots who speaks like a riddle and punishes like a storm. Beneath him are the officers, dressed a little less like the undead and more like well-worn statues. They carry ledgers and compasses and bark orders with a kind of tired disdain, like they've already explained this 100 times and you still haven't gotten it. Then there are the midshipmen, barely older than you, but with enough nautical knowledge to tell the difference between port, starboard, and oh God, we're tipping. They're the ones who train the new recruits, though train here means shout at you until you stop doing it wrong. Some are kind, in a detached, professional way. Others seem to genuinely enjoy watching you suffer. You make mental notes of who offers advice and who just watches you get tangled in rope and fall over. Below them are the petty officers and specialists, men in charge of things like carpentry, cooking, gunnery, and sail repair. These are the lifeblood of the ship. They don't shout much. They don't need to. Their jobs are too important. When the sail tears in a storm, they're the ones who keep you from becoming driftwood. When the mast creaks like it's about to split, it's the carpenter who listens to the wood like it's whispering secrets. You gain immense respect for the sailmaker after watching him spend 6 hours sewing with fingers so calloused they look like tree bark. He doesn't speak much, but when he hands you a needle and nods at a tear, you realize he's trusting you with the ship's skin. You mess it up, of course, stab yourself twice and bleed on the canvas, but you try, and that seems to be enough. You're learning that on this ship, perfection isn't expected, just endurance. And below all of them, dead last on the totem pole, are people like you. The common sailors, the lubberers, the ones who sleep where they can and eat when they're not working and spend most of their time praying to gods they don't even believe in anymore. You scrub, you haul, you climb, you repeat. Days blend into nights, and the stars become your only reliable calendar. You learn the rhythm of the watch bells, 8 per shift, rung in pairs, and how to tell when it's almost over by the way your fingers stop responding to cold. You're taught how to steer very briefly and only under supervision. The wheel is massive, almost comically so, and it resists your grip like it has its own opinion about direction. One of the older sailors tells you the wheel is cursed, but everything is cursed to him. The sea, the sails, the salted pork. Especially the salted pork. And it's while chewing on a slab of that very meat that you finally experience something close to camaraderie. It happens over shared misery, of course, as all bonding does out here. A barrel of water has gone off. Yes, even water can rot. And a group of you are ordered to dump it overboard. The smell is so bad it makes even the rats flee. One man pukes directly into his shirt. Another tries to joke about it and ends up inhaling a fly. But you, all of you, are laughing through the horror. Wheezing, retching, crying, but laughing. It's not friendship exactly, but it's something. You no longer feel like a stranger. You're part of the crew now. Not liked, not trusted, not even fully tolerated, but accepted in that very specific way sailors do. Like a new scar that stops bleeding. And as you lie in your hammock that night, listening to the snores, groans, and quiet conversations around you, you realize this is the first time you don't want to jump overboard. But this new social order comes with its own perils. The higher-ups are always watching. One mistake, a dropped lantern, a loose line, a torn sail, and you're the one getting shouted at. Or worse, punished. Discipline is swift and theatrical. A man caught stealing rum is lashed in front of the crew. 20 lashes. You count them. You wish you hadn't. The bosun doesn't even break a sweat. And though you hate it, you understand it. One bad apple can sink a ship. Literally. A thief might be the difference between enough food and starvation. A lazy sailor might be the reason a mast snaps in a storm. And so, the fear is necessary. That doesn't make it easier to watch. You avert your eyes after lash 5, but the screams stay with you. You ask an older crewmate if this kind of punishment is common. He shrugs and says, "You ever seen a mutiny? You haven't. You hope you never will." But the implication is clear. It starts with small disobedience, then grows like rot in the hull. Here's a widely accepted historical fact. The chain of command on ships during the age of exploration was brutally rigid. Captains had near absolute authority, and officers were expected to enforce discipline without hesitation. But here's a lesser-known detail. Sometimes, sailors carried their own set of unwritten rules. You don't snitch unless you're ready to bleed. You don't hog food unless you can fight for it. You share tobacco if you have any. And if someone saves your life in a storm, you owe them. Forever. These rules aren't posted anywhere. They're learned by surviving. You pick them up one by one like scars. And eventually, you stop needing to ask questions because the rhythm of ship life carries you along. Wake, work, eat, watch, sleep, repeat. It becomes a kind of trance, a floating existence defined not by dates or decisions, but by the rise and fall of the sea and the way the sails breathe in the wind. Historians still debate what kept these ships functioning. Not the mechanics, but the morale. How did so many men, crammed into such small spaces with such bleak prospects, keep from turning on each other? Some say it was fear. Others claim it was shared purpose. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was also the strange bond forged by knowing that out here, you only have each other. If a storm comes, if pirates attack, if the food runs out, it's your hands on the ropes, your back on the oar, your strength holding the mast steady. You're not just part of the crew. You are the ship. A floating society where everyone knows everyone's smell, every cough, every superstition. And so, you get through another day, another night. You curse the sea, the wind, the weevils in your bread. You laugh at nothing. You spit into the water and dare it to do its worst. And as you climb the rigging at sunset, the light burning gold through the sails, the wind in your teeth, your fingers gripping rope that no longer cuts quite as deep, you realize you're still here. Still holding on. Still sailing. There's a particular kind of silence that only happens just before a storm. An eerie, breath-holding stillness where even the ocean seems to pause, as if bracing for what's to come. You're on deck, fiddling with a coil of rope that won't sit right. When you feel it, the sudden lack of wind, the oppressive weight of the air, the strange way your skin prickles like it's caught a warning the sky hasn't spoken yet. The birds vanish first. They always know. Then the sea darkens, not gradually, but all at once, like someone spilled ink across the horizon. You glance up and see clouds stacking like boulders, layered and heaving, bruised purple and green in the fading light. You've heard talk of storms, of course. Everyone has. You've even seen a few. But this feels different. This feels alive. The officer on watch doesn't shout, but when he speaks, it's sharp and quick, and suddenly the ship is a hive of motion. Sails are reefed. Loose gear is lashed. Buckets vanish. Hatches are sealed. Everyone moves faster, tighter, quieter. There's no yelling, no chaos, just grim efficiency. Because out here, storms are not something to argue with. You scramble to help, still not quite knowing what you're doing, but copying the man beside you with desperate precision. He ties off a line with one practice tug. You do the same, fingers trembling. He climbs the ratlins without hesitation. You follow, higher than you've ever gone, into the web of rigging that sways with each heartbeat of wind. From up here, you can see the storm's edge rolling toward you like a solid wall. And then, with a sound like the sky splitting, the first blast of wind slams into the sails. It's not just wind, it's fury. The sails groan and billow, and the mast shudders like it might snap in protest. Rain doesn't fall so much as explode from the clouds, hitting you sideways, biting your skin like needles. The ship lurches, tilting in ways that defy belief, and you cling to the ropes as water pours over your boots and into your ears. Below, someone is shouting. You can't make out the words, but the panic is clear. You half slide, half fall down the rigging, and hit the deck hard, bruising your ribs and possibly your soul. Someone grabs your collar and hauls you upright. No time for pleasantries. You're thrown a rope and told to hold. That's all. Just hold. So you do. You brace, you lean back, and you feel your muscles lock against the pull of the storm. Water floods across the deck. A barrel breaks loose and crashes past your leg, missing you by inches. Lightning cracks overhead, so bright it turns the sky white, and in that flash you see the captain, standing at the helm like some unholy figure carved from bone, his coat snapping, his eyes wide and fixed on the waves. He doesn't blink, doesn't flinch. You wonder, absurdly, if he's steering into it on purpose. Maybe he is. Maybe he believes this ship can only prove itself when tested by chaos. The waves are no longer background noise. They're towering beasts, rising up from the deep to slap the hull and demand attention. Each one lifts the ship higher than the last, then drops it with stomach-wrenching violence. You feel the structure of the vessel strain beneath you, timbers groaning like they're whispering final prayers. Someone near the bow screams as a rope snaps and whips across the deck, carving open a man's shoulder. You're thrown sideways and land against a crate. Something cracks. It might be your elbow. You can't tell. Pain has become a constant static. You crawl back to your rope, soak it in your bloodied hands, and hold on. Because there's nothing else to do. The storm owns you now. The wind howls. Not like a voice, but like all voices at once, crying out in ancient languages you've never heard but somehow understand. Stay down. Don't look. Don't hope. That's what it says. You shut your eyes and pray you'll open them again. Hours pass, or maybe days. The storm is endless. Time unravels. The world becomes noise and cold and water and the distant, muffled sound of your own fear. And then, as suddenly as it came, it begins to break. Not with sunshine, but with silence. The rain slows. The wind softens. The waves shrink as if tired of the fight. You lie on your back, soaked, shivering, mouth open to the sky, and just breathe. Around you, the ship creaks and groans, but it still floats. Men are slumped where they landed, too tired to speak. One weeps openly. No one mocks him. Someone else coughs up seawater and spits out a tooth. You sit up slowly, everything aching, and realize your fingers are still locked around a rope. You can't let go. They won't open. A sailor sees you struggling and gently pries them loose. His hands are shaking too. You nod at each other, a silent, brutal recognition. You survived. Barely. You drag yourself below deck. Every step a negotiation between pain and gravity. Inside, it's dark and damp and smells of soaked wood and blood and wet wool. But it's not moving. That's all you care about. You collapse into a corner, wrap yourself in a stolen blanket, and shake for a long time. Historians agree that storms were among the greatest dangers sailors faced, not just for the physical destruction they caused, but for the psychological damage. Men were driven mad by fear, by the howling darkness, by the knowledge that they could be snapped up by the sea at any moment and never found. But here's a lesser-known truth. Sometimes, after a storm, the crew grew closer. There was a kind of bonding in shared terror. You look around at the others as they limp and grumble and stitch each other's cuts, and you see in their faces relief, exhaustion, and something like pride. You're one of them now, not just tolerated, included. You faced the sea's wrath and didn't vanish. That counts for more than all the rope work and scrubbing in the world. One of the older men hands you a crust of bread and a mug of something hot. You take both with shaking hands, your fingers still raw and swollen, and murmur thanks. He doesn't respond, just clinks his mug to yours, drinks and sighs. No words needed. And still, as you sit there trying to absorb what just happened, you can't help but wonder, did the captain know the storm was coming? Did he steer into it? Or was this just fate, cruel and random as ever? Historians still argue whether sailors believe in fate or luck, or simply the cruel indifference of the sea. But on this ship, the captain believes in power. That much is clear. Power over nature. Power over death. And maybe, just maybe, he believes the ship is alive in some way. That she needs storms to test her. And you were just another piece of her puzzle. A pawn lashed to a plank, learning your place one crashing wave at a time. In the uneasy calm after the storm, the ocean takes on a strange, surreal quality. Flattened like hammered metal, slick and unbroken, as if the fury of the night before had wiped the world clean and left behind only a reflective void. You wake to find a ship drifting slowly across what feels less like water and more like a mirror, so still it amplifies every creak, cough, and hushed whisper aboard. But the stillness brings no comfort, only a slow, crawling dread. Because while the crew tends to the torn rigging and bruised limbs, someone quietly points out that the wind is gone. Not light, not gentle, gone. The sails hang limp like soggy laundry. The flags droop. The sea is dead silent. You hear your own breath and the scratch of your boots as you walk across the deck. And as the hours pass, the realization sinks in. You're becalmed. Adrift in the middle of nowhere, powerless, floating like a speck on a glass tabletop. The crew, already ragged from the storm, grows restless in a way that makes your skin itch. Jokes become bitter. Voices get short. Work is invented just to keep hands moving. Someone starts scrubbing the deck with terrifying vigor, muttering under his breath. Another stares at the still sails like he's willing them to flutter. It's the kind of silence that scrapes against the mind. Not a peaceful hush, but a loud absence, like being buried alive in open air. You quickly learn that still water makes people lose their grip. Not all at once. Slowly, like rope fraying strand by strand. At first, the officers maintain order. Rations are counted, watches are doubled, and everyone is told, calmly, firmly, that the wind will return. It always does. But after 3 days, the water barrels are sweating in the sun, and the salted meat tastes like rot. The bread is crumbling into dust and weevils. The crew stops speaking above a murmur. as if loud voices might scare off any breeze. The rats begin disappearing, not because they've fled, but because someone's eating them. You pretend not to notice. Everyone does. The captain still appears now and then, wordless, glaring at the horizon with a kind of smoldering fury that makes you stay far, far away. His coat is permanently soaked at the hem and stiff with salt. No one speaks to him unless spoken to. Someone claims to have seen him cut open a seabird and read the entrails. You don't ask questions, but you do start to feel it, that thick, cloying sense of time collapsing. Day and night blur. The sun moves, but it feels like a trick. The stars spin lazily overhead. You can no longer remember what direction you were supposed to be heading, or when you last washed your face, or what your own voice sounds like. It's the stillness. It steals pieces of you, one breath at a time. By day 5, tempers flare. A fight breaks out over a moldy biscuit. 2 men nearly kill each other with a marlin spike and a rope hook. The bosun beats them both unconscious just to stop it. No punishment, just silence. And you notice something else. Superstition is creeping back in. Not the joking kind. Real belief. Someone nails a chicken bone to the mast. Another smears oil across the railing to appease the spirits. You catch a man whispering into a bottle and then throwing it overboard like a message. There's talk of a curse. Maybe the ship offended the sea. Maybe it sailed into forbidden waters. Someone blames the captain. Someone else blames the greenhorns. New blood, bad luck. You're suddenly very aware that you are one of the newest. You don't sleep much. When you do, it's fitful. The heat below deck is unbearable. There's no breeze, no movement, just the sound of your own heartbeat and the groaning of wood drying in the sun. Your clothes cling to your skin. Your lips crack. Salt crystals form behind your ears. The barrels get lighter. The water tastes metallic and smells like fish. You drink anyway. You have to. Here's a widely known historical fact. Ships during long voyages often faced weeks of dead calm in the doldrums. Regions near the equator with no wind and oppressive humidity. But here's a lesser-known truth. It was in these moments, not the storms or the battles, that most mutinies began. Not out of rage, but boredom. Hopelessness. The way stillness gnaws its sanity until something snaps. You feel it beginning to happen now. One of the officers disappears for half a day. He's found hiding in the hold, talking to himself. Another simply climbs the rigging, ties himself to the crow's nest, and sings until his voice gives out. The rest of you pretend not to notice. You focus on tasks that don't matter, recoiling ropes that were already coiled, oiling tools you haven't used in days, pretending the routine is enough to keep you anchored. The ship has become a kind of floating theater, and everyone's playing a role in a tragedy that hasn't quite been written yet. You wonder if the captain has a plan. You doubt it. He looks like a man waiting to fight a god. But you do notice that he never blinks when he stares at the sea, like he's waiting for something, or daring it. And then, finally, one afternoon, when you stop hoping, when the deck is so hot your boots stick to it, when you've bitten your lip bloody just to stay awake, it happens. The faintest shift, a whisper, a ripple on the water. Someone gasps. Another drops a bucket. Then the sails give a soft bloom, catching just the edge of breeze. It's barely anything, but it's something. The entire crew stands still for a full minute, not daring to hope. And then the wind comes. Not strong, not fast, but steady. The sails fill. The ship leans slightly. The deck groans. And the entire crew lets out a breath none of you realized you were holding. It's not salvation. Not yet. But it's movement. Direction. Life. That night, the mood lifts like fog. Someone plays a pipe. Another taps rhythmically on a barrel. The cook finds a hidden stash of lemons and boils them into something almost drinkable. You sip it and weep. Quietly. No one mocks you. Because they've done it too. The wind keeps whispering. The ship picks up speed. You swear the stars look closer. And though the heat still lingers, and your skin still stings, and your belly still groans, you feel, for the first time in what feels like years, hope. Not the naive kind. The earned kind. The kind you fight for. And as you sit on the railing that night, feet dangling over a sea that's finally moving again, you realize something unexpected. You missed it. The motion, the creak, the salt in your lungs, the living of it. Being becalmed is worse than drowning, you decide, because drowning is fast. Stillness is a slow, merciless erasure. Historians still wonder how many ships went missing not because they sank, but because they simply drifted, becalmed for so long that the crew gave up one by one. No wind, no morale, no reason. They just stopped. You think about that now as the wind brushes your face and the ship groans forward, as the moon slips between clouds and lights the sea like a lantern. You think about how close you all came to unraveling. You think about the man in the crow's nest, and the officer whispering in the hold, and the rats no longer skittering. And you breathe deep, tasting the wind, hearing the sail sigh above like a lung waking up after a long sleep. You survived the storm, and now you've survived the stillness. Both are equally cruel. Both are part of the sea's strange, brutal mercy. You glance toward the captain, who hasn't moved from the helm. His coat flaps again. His eyes don't leave the stars. You wonder if he ever doubted the wind would return. You wonder what he would have done if it hadn't. You hope you never have to find out. You'd think that after a storm and a windless drift that nearly unraveled everyone's minds, things might settle into a rhythm. One of those long, dull stretches you can coast through on salt air and superstition. But no, because the moment the ship starts making decent headway again, the real trials begin. Food, or the glaring, unspoken lack of it. You've noticed it already, of course. Hardtack that breaks your teeth before you break it. Pork so salted it crunches with crystals, and water that tastes faintly like something once died in the barrel, but now the portions shrink. Noticeably, the cook, who used to bark insults while ladling mush, has gone quiet. And when you get your ration, it's with a silent look that says, "Don't ask. Just eat." So you do. You eat the stale, worm-riddled biscuit. You scrape the bottom of your bowl. You lick the salt from your fingers, not because it's delicious, but because your body's begging for something. Anything. Hunger becomes a low, persistent whine in your bones, like a dog locked in a room somewhere behind your ribs. It's manageable at first. You feel light, floaty. You even joke about it. I'm slimming down for shore leave. But after the third day of half rations and no explanation, laughter dies off like a starved fire. People stop joking. They stop talking at all during meals. And that's when you know the ship is rationing because they don't know when they'll resupply. What no one says, but everyone knows, is that you're lost. Not dramatically, not in some cinematic way where you're spinning circles in fog, but practically, subtly. The kind of lost where you realize the charts don't quite match the stars, and the stars don't quite match anything, and the man with the sextant is frowning more often than not. You overhear it in murmurs. The currents are off, the compass is twitchy. The last island was farther south than expected. The captain remains calm, which somehow makes it worse, like watching a dam hold just before it bursts. No one wants to question him, of course. Questioning the captain on a ship is like questioning gravity mid-fall. But you can feel the tension, see it in the way the officers clutch their journals tighter, how the helmsman glances over his shoulder more often than forward. And meanwhile, food continues to dwindle. Meals become a ritual of humiliation. One ladle of gray mush, half a biscuit, a smear of fat if you're lucky. Someone near you gets caught hoarding a crust in his boot. He's beaten, not because the food is precious, though it is, but because it's communal, and stealing from that is stealing from survival. You pretend not to look as he's dragged below, but you hear it. The grunts, the boots, the silence afterward. Here's a widely accepted historical fact. Scurvy was one of the great unseen killers of sailors. Not storms or pirates or sea monsters. Just the quiet absence of citrus. And here's the thing, they knew it even then. Knew that something in fruit, lemons, limes, oranges, kept their teeth in their heads and their flesh from falling off the bone. But supplies ran out, and substitutes were laughable. You look around and start noticing the signs: bleeding gums, bruises from nowhere, teeth that ache. One sailor's leg swells like a sack of grain and turns black at the edges. He tries to laugh it off until he can't stand. Then he just moans. The carpenter wraps it in linen and says a prayer. You hear someone mutter, "scurvy," and then quickly shush himself. You bite into your next biscuit and wonder if the crunchy bit was a worm or just a fragment of your molar. It doesn't matter. You swallow. You're starving, and starvation has no pride. You find yourself dreaming of food. Not feasts, not banquets. Just a warm bowl of stew, bread with butter, an apple whole and cold. The dreams make waking worse. One night, you wake up chewing your own blanket. By week's end, they start fishing. It's not protocol, and it's not productive, but it's something to do. Lines are dropped. Nets are cast. Hooks are baited with the smallest scraps imaginable. Most come up empty. One lucky fool snags a tuna the size of a child, and you'd think he'd won the lottery. The cook roasts it in salt and nothing else, and the line to get a sliver wraps halfway around the deck. You get a mouthful. You cry a little. No one says a word. The next day, they catch nothing. And the day after that, you begin to understand how men turn to desperation. It starts with rationing, then hoarding, then stealing, then worse. There's a story that floats quietly among the crew about a ship years ago, stranded and starving, where men drew lots. Someone always shakes their head and says, "That won't happen here." But they don't sound convinced. And here's a lesser-known fact. Captains often carried hidden stores of food, personal caches locked away, just in case. Not for the crew, for them, to keep their strength, their command. You hear rumors of such a stash on this ship, tucked in a barrel-marked tools or hidden beneath a navigator's chest. No one dares look, yet. But the longer the hunger gnaws, the more you feel eyes lingering near doors they shouldn't. Locks are checked more often. Keys stay on belts, never hung. You walk past the captain's quarters and swear you smell something sweet. Real food. It could be your mind, or it could be a sign that some people are eating better than others. You don't know what's worse, the hunger or the unfairness of it. You find yourself resenting everyone. People with more muscle, people who got extra rations by accident. Even the cook, whose job has become less about feeding and more about managing the fallout. And through it all, the ship sails on, relentlessly, aimlessly. The horizon never changes. Just water. Sunday moon. Water. Again and again until you wonder if this is all just a punishment, like the gods curse you to circle the sea until you forget land ever existed. You try to remember the last time you felt full, or warm, or truly alive. The memory slips through your fingers like salt water. Your belt is tighter now, not by choice. Your cheeks are hollow. You've stopped shaving because what's the point? You don't speak much. You conserve energy. The older sailors say that's wise. Thought burns calories. Thinking too hard burns hope. You stare at your hands and count the calluses. You try not to think about what it would take to jump overboard and swim to somewhere, anywhere. And then, as if the sea heard your silent plea, someone shouts. Land. It's a smear on the horizon at first, barely real. Everyone crowds the rail, squinting, whispering. You're afraid of hope, but slowly it sharpens green, brown, jagged. Trees, shoreline, life. The sails are trimmed, the course adjusted. You move faster than you've moved in days. You tie lines with shaking hands. You clean the deck with what strength you have left. The officers bark orders with renewed authority. The captain smiles. You see it, for the first time, and you realize he knew. Maybe not where, but something. He was waiting for this, holding back the tide of panic, betting on land before mutiny. And he won. As the anchor drops and the longboats are lowered, you nearly fall over yourself to climb aboard. Your legs barely work. Your stomach is a hollow drum. But your eyes drink in the green. Trees that sway, sand that sparkles, birds, bugs, smells, not salt, not sweat, earth, sap, fruit. You weep. You don't even try to hide it. Historians still argue whether landfall was salvation or illusion. Some islands offered food, water, or rest. Others offered poison, hostile tribes, disease. But to sailors, it didn't matter. It was land, a break in the monotony, a promise that you were not forgotten. And as you step onto solid ground, barefoot, knees buckling, you feel the earth hum beneath your skin like a song you didn't know you'd forgotten. You press your hand to a tree. You lie in the grass. You breathe and feel your lungs stretch in ways they haven't in weeks. And even if this land is dangerous, even if it's barren, you take it. Because it's not the sea, it's not the ship, it's not hunger. And tonight, you will sleep with something more than salt in your mouth. You will dream of roots, of fruit, of warmth. You don't know how long you'll stay here. Maybe days, maybe hours. But for now, you're fed. You're grounded. You're human again. You wake to birdsong, and for a brief, golden moment, you forget the ocean entirely. No creaking wood beneath your back, no salt in your throat, no dull ache in your stomach from half rations and panic. Just the soft rustle of trees above you, the earthy scent of damp leaves and warm soil, and the hush of wind that isn't trying to kill you. Your boots are off. Your legs stretch against real ground. You'd almost call it paradise if not for the not-so-subtle way the officers keep glancing at the tree line and the fact that no one's smiling. Not really. Land, as it turns out, comes with its own brand of stress. The shore party was sent ahead at first light, armed, tense, and wary, while the rest of the crew was ordered to wait by the longboats in suffocating suspense. But when they returned, not running or bleeding, but carrying water skins, fruits the size of helmets, and something that might be a roastable root, everyone practically wept. You were given a piece of fruit. Just a piece. The juice dripped down your chin like nectar from a dream. You would have kissed the dirt if you weren't too busy eating it by accident. But after that, the work began, refilling the barrels, checking for good timber, setting up temporary shelters with torn sails and bits of rope, and watching. Always watching for the signs of locals. Because no matter how empty this place feels, there's always that gnawing knowledge in the back of your head. Someone might live here. And they might not be happy about guests. The island or coast or whatever patch of green you've landed on is dense with sound and life in a way that unnerves you. After so long at sea, you forgot how loud land can be. Bugs drone like invisible choirs. Birds scream from trees like drunken tavern goers. And the underbrush rustles constantly with creatures you're sure don't want to meet you, just as you don't want to meet them. Still, you can't help but feel grateful for it all. Every noise is proof that you're somewhere living, somewhere real. Your tasks, though mind-numbing, are oddly satisfying on solid ground. You carry buckets of water from a nearby spring, and it's cold. Shockingly cold. It hurts your teeth and your hands and your throat in the most glorious way. You scrub the salt from your clothes and even yourself. Bathing. Actual bathing. Your skin, now visibly multiple shades darker and rougher than when you left port, almost sighs in relief. You eat roots roasted over an open flame, wash it down with boiled water flavored by jungle herbs someone claimed were definitely not poisonous, and fall asleep under the stars with dirt in your nails and a full stomach. Heaven, or at least a very convincing illusion of it. But the reprieve is short-lived. By the third day ashore, a new kind of tension creeps in. Not the sharp, immediate panic of storms or starvation, but the slow burn unease that comes from knowing you've overstayed your welcome. The island is quiet in the wrong ways now. Birds go silent too early. Shadows move too quickly. Footprints appear near camp that don't match anyone's boots. The officers get twitchy. A watch is set. Muskets are loaded. The captain holds a meeting that you're not invited to, but the whispers afterward confirm the mood. We're not alone. Someone or something is watching. It could be locals. It could be pirates. It could be hallucination. Historians still debate the specifics of encounters during voyages like yours. Whether first contact was respectful, violent, or entirely misunderstood. Maybe it's all three. But here and now, you don't want to find out. You just want to fill the barrels and leave. But filling the barrels means more trips inland, more chances to get lost or ambushed or bitten by something you can't pronounce. So the crew is split. Some stay at camp, others escort the water teams. You, lucky as ever, get both roles and shifts. The jungle is beautiful, yes, in a way that would take your breath away if the humidity hadn't already stolen it. But it's also a maze. Vines like ropes, trees like pillars, insects that hum and bite and crawl into your sleeves. You've never sweated so much in your life. It's like your skin is trying to abandon ship. Every few feet you look over your shoulder, sure you heard a whisper or saw a movement. Nothing, but your heart won't slow down. One afternoon, while fetching water, you do see something, a flash of color, red, maybe fabric, disappearing behind a tree. You stop. So there's the man next to you. You say nothing, but you both start walking faster. That night, the captain gives new orders. No wandering alone. No noise after sundown. The longboats are kept ready, half-loaded, as if you'll need to flee. You realize then that this land, for all its fruit and water and green comfort, is not yours. It was never offered. You took it, and someone might take it back. You sleep with one eye open. So does everyone else. The night noises change again, harsher, closer. You hear a scream, not from the jungle, from your own camp. A man missing, a torn shirt found near the tree line. Panic. A rushed search turns up nothing. The captain's jaw tightens. He gives no speech, just points to the ship. Time to go. The final day is a whirlwind. Barrels lashed. Crew assembled. The jungle watches. You feel it. Eyes and shadows. The ship groans in welcome as you climb aboard. You never thought you'd be happy to return to those cramped decks, to the salty stench and splintered rails. But you are. You are so grateful. The sails are raised. The wind obeys. The land slips away. You exhale for the first time in days. And yet something lingers. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. Or just a deep, primal understanding that you survived again. And that survival always comes at a price. You don't know who washed you from the jungle. You never will. Historians still ask, how many early encounters between explorers and locals were peaceful, and how many were just quietly tense? Mutually avoided conflict? Misread signs? Was that fabric you saw a warning? Or an invitation? You'll never know. As the island disappears behind you, your belly full, your skin clean, your thirst quenched, you feel a strange hollowness settle in. Because yes, you're fed, you're stronger, but you also left someone behind, one of your own, lost to a land you were never meant to set foot on. And now, as the waves pick up again and the sky reclaims its vastness, you look back once more and whisper a silent apology to the trees, to the eyes, to the silence that let you leave. The jungle doesn't answer. It never does, but it remembers. The farther you sail from that tense patch of green, the more the ship exhales, not with sound, but in posture. Shoulders drop, eyes soften, conversations resume, and laughter flickers like a candle that almost went out but caught the wick again at the last second. Yet beneath that fragile return to normalcy lies a shared understanding that no one wants to name. The knowledge that land, for all its promises, is not always salvation, and sometimes survival feels more like retreat than victory. You carry that feeling with you as the ship finds its rhythm once again, creaking and groaning like an old beast waking from a nap, sails bellied with wind, the deck hot underfoot, and the ocean vast and indifferent all around. But now comes something else entirely, a challenge less violent than storms and more insidious than hunger. The mind-numbing monotony of open sea routine. Because while the first leg of the journey was full of discovery, crisis, and near-death drama, this stretch is just time. Endless, repetitive, sun-bleached, sanity-eroding time. You wake, eat, scrub, coil, climb, patch, repeat. The sun rises in the same place, sets in the same place, and somehow feels hotter each time. The ocean stretches unchanged in every direction, like you've been sentenced to drift across an infinite mirror, your punishment for surviving too many times. And you, poor you, start to come undone not through terror or trauma, but through the sheer, soul-sucking sameness of everything. You used to count the days. Now you don't even remember what day it is. Time blurs, not like a soft watercolor painting, but like wet ink smudged across a logbook, bleeding into nothing. The bells still ring. The watches rotate. Meals are served, but there's no real sense of motion. It's like sailing through a dream where you keep walking through the same room no matter how many doors you open. Even your body starts to forget what effort is for. You move only as much as needed, speak only when spoken to, and laugh, if at all, like someone remembering a joke from past life. The conversations shift too. They become cyclical, recursive. One sailor tells a story about a tavern girl for the fourth time, and no one interrupts. You nod along even though you already know the ending, because it's better than silence. Another sings a sea shanty in a cracked voice, and you all join in. Not because you want to sing, but because the repetition feels like a rope you can hold on to. You begin inventing rituals, a certain way to fold your blanket, a prayer whispered to your boots, a 3-tap rhythm against a mast before going below. Little routines to anchor your sanity in place, because otherwise you're just floating in body, mind, and spirit. Here's a historical fact most people don't consider. The average voyage in the age of exploration could last months or even years, and often the greatest danger wasn't death, but boredom. A soul-deep stagnation that made men hallucinate, turn cruel, or simply fade into listless shells. But a lesser-known truth, some sailors began to crave the tedium. They welcomed it. After storms, starvation, and disappearances, monotony was peace. It meant nothing was currently trying to kill you. And so, weirdly, part of you begins to feel safe. Not happy, not content, but steady. You wake up knowing what will happen. The same ropes will need tightening. The same rats will need chasing. The same officer will shout the same command, and you'll follow it with the same muttered insult. It becomes a sort of rhythm, like your own internal tide. Predictable, soothing even, until it's not. Because monotony has a dark side. At first it dulls your senses, then it dulls your empathy. You stop noticing things, little things like the man across from you coughing more than usual, or the strange discoloration near the foremast. When every day is a copy of the last, you stop looking for differences. You become blind to slow decay. And that's when trouble finds you. It begins, as always, with a smell. A sour, sweet, rotting kind of smell that clings to your throat like spoiled milk. At first, it's dismissed, maybe a spoiled cask, maybe a dead rat. But it lingers, grows. Someone complains of dizziness. Another passes out during morning duty. The surgeon is summoned, but his supplies are already low and his experience lower. He shrugs. Heat sickness, he says. Maybe bad water. But then 3 more fall ill. Then 6. Then 10. And the ship's steady hum is replaced by groans, wet coughing, and the desperate clatter of tin bowls. The routine collapses like a snapped mast. The healthy work twice as hard. The sick are laid below in the already stifling dark, their bodies hot and slick with sweat. The smell spreads. The surgeon stops pretending. He starts cutting open oranges he swore were saved for officers. He doesn't care now. He's desperate. You somehow stay upright. Maybe it's luck. Maybe you've adapted to poison. Maybe the captain has been slipping the good fruit to those he deems useful. You don't ask. You just work. More than you should. You hoist and haul and run messages and tend to the sick. You sponge foreheads and clean vomit and hold hands that tremble like moths. You do not speak much, but you listen. You hear the murmurs, theories, prayers, curses. You hear someone beg to go overboard rather than die in the dark. You hear the carpenter sob quietly while sharpening a saw for amputations. And in the midst of it all, you realize something terrifying. No one is in control. Not the officers, not the captain, not the surgeon. The ship, for all its order and discipline, is just a floating town with no healer, no law, no map. And you, drifting endlessly, have nowhere to go but further into whatever this is. Historians still debate the true cause of many sickness outbreaks on long voyages. Was it food, contaminated water, poor hygiene, or just sheer proximity? After all, disease doesn't care how well you follow orders. It wants bodies, and this ship offers plenty. The fever eventually peaks. A few die, quietly, wrapped in sheets and dropped overboard without ceremony. The bodies make small splashes, barely noticed by the ship that groans on. But the mood never recovers. Something shifts permanently. The laughter doesn't return. Neither do the songs. The games of dice and bone fade. You return to your bunk every night, exhausted beyond reason, and stare up at the wood above you like it's the inside of your coffin. You count knots, nails, cracks. You begin to hallucinate faces in the wood grain. You name them. You talk to them, just for company. One night, a man jumps. You hear the splash. You run to the rail. Nothing. No shout. No struggle. Just gone. You stare into the water for a long time, wondering what he saw there. Wondering what it would take for you to follow. Not yet, you think. Not yet. You go below and tie your boots extra tight, as if anchoring yourself to the deck might keep you from slipping too. And you sleep like a man clinging to a thread. But not all is despair. One morning, the wind changes. The birds return. The horizon sharpens. And someone shouts, "Land." Again, another chance. Not salvation, maybe, but a change. And after all this time, change feels like a miracle. You smile, just a little. It hurts your face. Land again, and this time, you don't rush toward it like a starving dog after a scrap of meat. You approach slowly, warily, as if expecting it to vanish like a mirage the closer you get. The horizon is lined with low green hills and trees that sway lazily in a breeze you can't yet feel, but what catches your eye isn't the beauty, it's the smoke. Thin, white columns rising in pairs from somewhere just beyond the visible tree line. Controlled, deliberate, which means people, which means rules, which means the sea's endless indifference is about to be replaced by the delicate, unpredictable gamble of human interaction. As the longboats are lowered and you're herded in with the others, the ship groaning behind you like it resents being left out, you try to mentally prepare. No sudden moves, no staring, no breaking rank. You're told to carry barrels, rope, tools, things to make you look useful, unthreatening. The air grows richer as you near the shore, thick with scents you haven't smelled in weeks. Wet earth, blooming flowers, firewood. Even the bugs sound different. A high, chattering song like laughter, sharp and cheerful. But your stomach coils anyway. Because if there's one thing you've learned, it's that land doesn't mean safety. It means questions. Who owns this dirt? Who decides if you stay? And what will they ask in return? The moment your boots hit sand, the tone shifts. No welcome party. No weapons raised either. Just stillness. You unload the cargo, eyes flicking between the dense jungle and the smoke further inland, listening for footsteps that never come. Eventually, a figure appears, tall, cloaked in bright cloth, holding something that looks like a staff but might just as easily be a spear. More figures follow. They're watching, not approaching, not afraid, just assessing. The captain, ever the diplomat, steps forward with an overly elaborate bow that makes his knees crack. There's a brief exchange. No shared language. Only gestures and mind intentions. Hands opened, items offered, the universal theater we don't want trouble. And somehow it works. A gesture is returned. One of the locals steps forward, points to the barrels, then to the jungle path, then back to the shore. A loop. A trade. Water and food in exchange for metal tools. A transaction, not a confrontation. Relief drips through the crew like cool water. But even then, no one relaxes completely. The officers rotate guards. The cook watches his stores like a jealous dragon. You are assigned to the second group, the ones who carry the trade goods deeper into the jungle. Not a task you envy, but also not one you'd refuse. Because the reward is food, real food, and for that, you'd walk into anything. The jungle path is wide enough for two, shaded and surprisingly quiet. You try not to gawk at the trees that arch overhead like cathedral vaults, or the vines so thick they look like they can hold a man. But the most unnerving thing isn't the unfamiliar terrain, it's how clean it is. No fallen branches, no debris, as if it's been tended, lived in, watched. You feel like a guest in someone's living room, tiptoeing past the good chairs. At the halfway point, the trail opens into a clearing where you're invited, wordlessly, to sit. The locals begin laying out items. Fruits, roots, what looks like smoked fish, leaves wrapped around steaming bundles of rice. In return, your officers present knives, mirrors, iron nails. The exchange is slow, ceremonial. You're not allowed to speak, just observe, keep still, smile if needed. You do, because the food smells incredible. And when it's your turn to eat, you nearly weep. Not from joy, not from hunger, but from a sensation of something new. Something not dried, salted, worm-eaten, or flavorless. The texture, the warmth, the sweetness. It reminds you that you have taste buds, that you're a person. And here's a widely accepted historical fact. Early contact between sailors and indigenous peoples often involved trade that benefited both sides. Metal for food, beads for spices, language for stories. But here's a lesser-known detail. The sailors were often watched for days before contact. Assessed, measured, sometimes accepted, sometimes not. You can feel that invisible trial here. You're being studied, not just what you carry, but how you behave, how you laugh, who you help, whether you leave trash behind or pick up after yourself. You tie your bundle of tools tighter. You nod and say nothing when a child offers you fruit. You try to make yourself small, polite, forgettable, because you need this to go well. Not just for you, but for the ship. For the crew who now waits for your return with dry mouths and sore hands, hoping the forest will feed them, even if they can't see it. That night, you return to the ship not only full, but carrying more food than you ever thought you'd see again. The barrels are loaded with clean water, bundles of roots, spices so strong they sting your eyes. The crew cheers. Even the captain allows himself a rare grin. But amid the joy, a quiet unease creeps back in, because this island, generous as it is, isn't just a stop. It's a reminder of difference, of risk, of how easily kindness can sour. You've seen it happen. Another voyage, another land, a single misunderstanding, and blood runs. So everyone treads lightly. The next few days are a delicate dance of gathering and gratitude, of quiet trades and polite departures. You sleep better, yes. You grow stronger, but you never stop listening for the sound of spears behind the trees. You never forget that you are a visitor on borrowed time. Historians still wonder about the true nature of early exchanges. How much was peaceful trade? How much was veiled threat? And how often did goodwill break under pressure? You think about that as you help the carpenter hammer nails into a new cask. The nails, once worthless, now feel powerful. Currency, influence, control. And that's when you realize the balance is shifting. The longer you stay, the more you take. Not just food and water, but attention, curiosity, power. The crew begins walking with straighter backs. The captain starts issuing orders like he owns the trees. And the locals, once warm, begin to watch more closely. The smiles fade a little. The path seems narrower. You feel it turning, slowly, like a tide pulling away from the shore. And so, the decision is made. Leave while the sea still welcomes you. The ship is stocked, the barrels sealed, the sails ready. You load for the last time, eyes scanning the jungle one more time for movement. There's none, but the silence is thicker than before. Not angry, not hostile, just tired, as if they've seen this story before. Watch the same ships arrive, take, smile, and vanish. You wonder if you'll be remembered, if they'll tell stories about you, or if you'll become one more ghost in their long history of interruptions. You offer a silent goodbye to the trees, to the clearing, to the fruit you'll probably never taste again. And then, with a creak and a groan and a sigh from the sails, you leave. The island shrinks behind you. The ocean spreads ahead. The routine begins anew. But you're not the same. You carry something with you now. Not just food or strength, but a memory of hospitality, of complexity, of your own smallness. And as the horizon opens up and the wind fills your lungs once more, you whisper a promise into the salt air. Not out loud, but in your bones. A promise to remember that not all survival is conquest. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept what's given and leave a hole. Days blur again, this time heavier, not with dread, but with the weight of having almost been comfortable, only to be thrust back into the slow churning rhythm of the sea, where the wind is fickle and the sun relentless, and the wooden world beneath your feet creaks like a tired old man who just wants to lie down. You thought being full would fix everything, thought that food and rest and land underfoot would soothe the ache you've carried since leaving port. But it turns out the ache was never just physical. It's deeper, lingering, and as the sea stretches on endlessly, you feel it gnawing at you again, not with sharp teeth like hunger or terror, but like a dull, persistent echo. What are we even doing out here? No one says it out loud, of course, because that kind of question has no good answer. You're exploring. You're charting. You're representing the crown, the company, the captain, some godforsaken flag no one's seen in months. But really, you're drifting, floating, hoping the sea hasn't forgotten to be kind. The mood aboard shifts into something quieter. Men speak in half sentences. Jokes are tired. Even the cook has stopped muttering curses under his breath. Everyone's waiting for something, but no one knows what. That's when the rumors begin again, soft and slippery, passed like contraband from bunk to bunk. Ghost ship sightings. Whispers in the wind. A distant silhouette that keeps appearing just before dawn. Too far to hail, too steady to be natural. You hear it the way you hear everything on this ship. Secondhand, half-believed, but impossible to shake. A few men claim they saw it outright. A tall ship with torn sails and a glowing masthead, trailing fog in the clearest weather, moving against the wind. One swears it followed you for a full night. Another says it vanished the moment someone tried to signal. You roll your eyes at first, because of course sailors invent monsters when they're bored, and nothing fuels imagination like repetition and rot. But then you see it, or you think you do, a dark shape just off the starboard bow at twilight, when the light plays tricks and the ocean glints like shattered glass. You blink and it's gone, but the seed has been planted. Now you're watching the horizon more carefully. Now you start to wonder. The night watches grow tense. You hear bells that were never rung, ropes creaking with no wind, footsteps on the upper deck when everyone should be asleep. You tell yourself it's the ship settling, the breeze teasing the lines, the fever still burning faintly through your blood. But the unease spreads. Someone starts carving charms into the mast. Someone else refuses to sleep below anymore. You find your own fingers twitching toward your boots at odd hours, needing to feel the leather there, like it'll anchor you to reality. It's not just paranoia, it's something heavier. Something that settles in your chest when you look too long at the horizon and realize you're nowhere near anything. No land, no rescue, just water. Deep, unknowable, and ancient. The sea is beautiful during the day, yes, sparkling like coins tossed from heaven. But at night, it becomes something else. Black, bottomless, silent in ways that make your ears ring. You begin to realize that if something were to rise up from beneath, some creature, some forgotten thing, it wouldn't need to roar. It wouldn't need to attack. It would only need to exist. That would be enough. You sleep lighter now, ears tuned to every creak and splash. And though nothing ever happens, you feel like something might. And that's worse. The officers say nothing about the ghost ship rumors, which makes it worse too. They act as if everything is fine, which tells you everything is definitely not fine. One morning, you notice the captain has tied a red string around the wheel post. A superstition, or maybe a ward. You've never seen him do that before. No one dares ask. And then, because the sea has a cruel sense of timing, the fog arrives. Thick and sudden, a rolling wall of white that descends in minutes, silencing the world with a soft, wet whisper. Visibility drops to nothing. You can barely see the man standing beside you. The sails vanish above like ghosts. The deck becomes an island adrift in the clouds. No one speaks, not even the officers. The ship slows, not from choice, but because it has to. Navigation becomes guesswork. The compass spins slightly. The air grows cold. Damp seeps into your boots, your shirt, your bones. You feel it in your teeth. Someone lights a lantern, and the glow is swallowed immediately, as if the fog is hungry. You stand there, hour after hour, unable to rest, waiting for something, anything to appear. Another ship, a rock, a whale, a ghost. But the fog offers nothing, only silence. You begin to wonder if you're moving at all. If this isn't some trick, some limbo, where time has stopped and you'll drift like this forever, forgotten between worlds. Your thoughts spiral. You try to remember what land smells like, what fire sounds like, what your mother's voice was. The fog is that kind of quiet. It steals memory too. Here's a widely accepted historical fact. Fog was one of the most feared conditions at sea. Not because it killed directly, but because it disoriented so profoundly that men forgot which direction they'd come from, or whether they were near shore or sailing toward it at full speed. Ships crashed not because they were reckless, but because they were lost. But here's a lesser-known truth. Fog drove some men mad. Quietly, slowly, they began seeing shapes in it. Ships, figures, animals. They claimed to hear music, voices calling their names. And history, for all its cold logic, still wonders how many of those stories were fantasy and how many were something else. Something the sea does not explain. You think about this as the fog clings for 3 full days, each one grayer and more dreamlike than the last. Your hand crack from damp rope. Your lips peel. You barely eat. Sleep becomes a strange, shallow thing full of waterlogged dreams and distant bells. On the 3rd day, you wake up convinced you're already dead, that the ship is a floating purgatory, and that the fog will never lift. You say nothing. No one else does either. No one wants to admit they're thinking the same. And then, suddenly, cruelly, beautifully, it's gone. The fog lifts like a curtain on a stage, vanishing in a blink, and the sea is there again. Wide, blue, indifferent. You blink at the light like a mole crawling from a hole. The sun feels foreign. You squint at your shipmates, as if seeing them for the first time. There is no ghost ship, no wall, no land, just ocean, as far as the eye can see. And the strangest thing is, no one talks about it afterward. No jokes, no questions. No, remember when we couldn't see our own hands? Nothing. The fog is treated like a nightmare you don't retell, because speaking it aloud might bring it back. You clean the lanterns. You tighten the ropes. The sails snap in the breeze like they're angry for being idle. And the ship sails on. But something inside you has shifted. You don't trust the sea anymore. Not that you ever fully did, but now you know it lies. That it hides things. That it can make days vanish. Make your name echo with no source. Make a sane man whisper to the wind like it owes him an answer. And you, floating on this wooden sliver in an endless nothing, realize how fragile you are, how easily unmade. And so, you make a vow. The next time you see land, you won't hesitate. You'll kiss the dirt, bury something of yourself in it, and remember what it is to stand still. Because here, on the sea, You are never still. You are never safe. You are only between places, between people, between versions of yourself. And for the first time since leaving port, you wonder not when you'll get home, but if. Not because you'll die, though that's always a possibility, but because you don't know what home is anymore. After storms and sickness and fog and ghosts, what version of you returns? Who would recognize you now? Your skin is darker, your voice lower, your thoughts quieter. You haven't laughed freely in weeks. And so, the sea keeps you, not as a prisoner, but as something subtler, a mirror that shows only what's left after the world forgets you. When the lookout finally shouts land again, it doesn't come with the usual cheer. It comes with a note of disbelief, as if the word itself is too good to be true, or maybe too dangerous, like a forgotten memory suddenly resurfacing. You're on deck when it happens, coiling rope with calloused hands that barely register sensation anymore. And for a full minute you don't react, just blink at the word, turning it over in your mind like a stone you're not sure you recognize. Land, a promise or a threat, depending on who claims it first. The crew stirs cautiously. Eyes lift to the horizon where, just faintly, a jagged dark line splits sea from sky. Not a perfect island, not some paradise dreamed up in the belly of a fever, but real earth, edged in cliffs, crowned with dark green trees, like a broken tooth jutting from the gums of the ocean. The closer you draw, the stranger it becomes. No smoke, no sign of movement, no welcome, just rocks and woods and silence, as if the island itself is holding its breath. You dock awkwardly in a narrow inlet, the ship groaning like it knows better, the water around you strangely still. You're sent ashore with a small crew. Scouting, the captain says, though you suspect the real goal is answers. What is this place? Is it safe? Is it useful? Is it empty? The moment your boots strike the shore, a chill moves through you. Not wind, not cold exactly, but a quiet wrongness that sticks to your ribs. The trees here are different, darker, denser. The canopy swallows sound. Even your own footsteps seem muted, like you're walking through memory rather than space. You venture inland slowly, blades out, voices low. It smells like wet stone and bark and something you can't name, like smoke that was never fire. You see no animals, no bits, just vines that crawl like veins and moss that glows faintly under the shade. You find ruins, not massive ones, not temples or walls, but scattered stones half sunk into the earth, too straight to be natural, too old to belong to anyone you've met. A staircase that goes nowhere. A pillar with carvings so eroded you can't even guess the language. A flat stone with scorched edges and a perfectly circular indentation in its center. You don't know what it means, and neither does the officer beside you, though he makes a show of sketching it anyway, pretending he has answers. You feel like trespassers, like children in a house that hasn't been lived in for centuries. And here's a widely accepted historical fact. Many early explorers came upon ancient sites whose original builders were long gone. Entire cities lost to time and overgrowth, their stories erased, but their bones still standing. And here's something lesser known. Some of those sites were avoided by the very people who lived nearby. Shunned, feared, not because they were haunted in the ghostly sense, but because they bore the weight of forgotten power. You think about that as your crew begins setting up camp. Just for the night, the officer says, but already men are gathering firewood, digging latrines, acting like you'll be here longer. You sit near the stone circle, watching twilight crawl between the trees, and you swear you hear something, a low hum, maybe, or a breath, or the creak of something massive shifting just beneath the earth. You look up, but no one else reacts. Maybe it's in your head, but that night, no one sleeps well. Not because of noise or danger or even discomfort, but because of dreams. Shared ones. You hear about them the next morning, different stories, sure, but the same flavor. Strange music, black water, voices speaking in circles. A sailor mutters that the trees moved while he slept. Another claims his boots are wet, though it hasn't rained. You tell yourself it's nerves. Just the brain, overcooked by salt and sun and fear. But the island doesn't let go. You stay longer than planned. The captain wants wood, water, maybe even a permanent marker, a base camp for future voyages. The carpenter finds good timber. The barrels fill quickly, but still no animals. No signs of life, not even bugs. It's as if the land is holding still, waiting for you to make a mistake. And then you do. You dig too deep, or touch something you shouldn't, or maybe just stay too long. You're on night watch when it begins, a flicker in the treetops, a rustling without wind, a sound like footsteps coming from all directions at once. You rouse the others, weapons drawn, but find nothing. No threat, no animal, just a silence that feels taut, like a string pulled tight across the forest floor. You retreat to camp, double the guard, but something is shifting. The air feels heavier. The dreams get worse. One man walks into the woods and doesn't return. Another lashes out in his sleep, swearing he saw someone standing over him. The captain finally relents. We leave tomorrow. But the island disagrees. A storm arrives before dawn. Not like the ones at sea. Those come with warning, with rhythm. This one falls like a curtain, instant and absolute. Rain that hits sideways. Wind that howls like a choir of teeth. Trees snap. Tents rip. A fire is swallowed whole in seconds. You grab your gear and run, stumbling toward the boats, only to find the tide has dragged them away. One is smashed against the rocks. The other gone. The ship, still anchored offshore, is visible only in flashes of lightning. You're trapped. The officer shouts, orders no one hears. You huddle beneath a half-collapsed lean-to with 5 others, waiting for the sky to decide whether it will drown you or spare you. The storm lasts hours, days. You lose track. The jumble floods. The ruins vanish beneath water and mud. When the rain finally stops, the world feels different, flattened, rewritten. The crew is thinner now. Some swept away, some vanished. You stop counting, and then the fog returns. Not like before. Not ocean fog, but land fog. Heavy, white, choking. It rolls in from the tree-line and does not recede. You move through it in slow motion, voices muffled, torches useless. The path to the beach is gone. The sound of the sea disappears. You realize the jungle is closing in, not physically, but perceptually. Every step forward feels like circling back. Someone suggests climbing a tree for a better view. But the moment he's out of sight, he stops responding. You find his boot later, still warm. You stop calling names after that. The island wants you confused, and it's winning. Historians still debate the nature of such disappearances. Were they accidents? Attacks? Madness? Or something else? The reports, when they survive, are vague. Crew lost in strange weather. Unmapped island proved hostile. But what you feel here doesn't belong in a report. It belongs in a whisper, in a warning passed from one sailor to another. Don't land where the birds don't sing. Don't linger where the forest is quiet. You try to remember who said that, but your thoughts are molasses. Your memories blur. You dream of circles now, stone ones, ink ones, glowing ones. You stop asking if you're asleep. It doesn't matter. Eventually, the fog begins to lift. Not fast, not entirely, just enough to show the sea again. The ship is there, still intact, still waiting. A few longboats are found, miraculously untouched. You don't question how. You just run. You row without speaking, eyes fixed on the ship like it's a lighthouse in a storm of forgetting. The captain hauls you aboard with hands that shake. The sails are raised before the last man even touches deck. And then the island is behind you, swallowed once more in mist. You do not mark it on the charts. You do not speak its name, if it ever had one. You just sail. And this time, no one celebrates. The ocean doesn't feel freeing. It feels normal, like falling back into a nightmare you at least understand. You walk the deck like a man released from a spell. but part of you stay behind. You feel it. In your spine, in your teeth, in the way your dreams now end with water seeping up through the floorboards. The crew avoids your eyes. You all carry something you didn't have before, not gold, not treasure, but a pause in your thoughts. A moment you don't speak of, a silence that will follow you long after you reach home, if home is still a place that remembers you. You've crossed half the world by now, or maybe more, maybe less, since time has lost meaning out here, stretched and twisted by storms and sun and fear and fog. So the days fold over each other like poorly kept maps, and you've stopped asking how long it's been since you first stepped aboard. The sails are frayed, the wood is warped, the men are fewer, but still the ship presses on, pulled by the promise of something. Not treasure, not glory, not even land anymore, but just an end. You feel it in the way the wind has steadied, the way the crew has gone quiet, the way the stars have returned in familiar shapes overhead, constellations you haven't seen since the early days back when you still believed in fresh starts. The ocean, too, has changed. It's calmer now, but not in a peaceful way. It's more like a hell breath. The waves are smaller, the surface glassy. You don't trust it. You've learned not to trust anything that's too still. But you also don't resist it, because resistance is a kind of arrogance, and the sea has punished that before. So you move with it, quiet and alert, like a cat passing through tall grass, knowing something's watching, but not sure what. The ship groans like an old priest whispering secrets to the wind. Below deck, everything creaks in rhythm, as if the wood itself is tired of holding everyone up. You lie in your hammock at night, swaying with the hull, and wonder, really wonder, if this is what you are now, a sailor, a shadow, a soul half swallowed by salt and distance. There's a rumor again, this time about returning. One of the officers mentions it quietly during a chart review. They've turned the heading toward familiar shores. The word spreads not like a cheer, but like a question. Home? The thought makes your stomach twist. Because what does home even mean now? You've been gone so long that you no longer remember the details of the streets you grew up on. The smell of the bakery, the rhythm of market bells. You can't picture your mother's face clearly anymore. Just pieces, the slope of her nose, the way she scolded with her eyebrows. Even your name, when spoken by someone else, sounds foreign, like it belongs to someone who died months ago. And maybe he did. Maybe you're just what's left. Still, the ship turns. The stars guide you. And the closer you get to land, the more everything changes again. Not quickly, but like ink seeping into paper. The crew shaves, scrubs, folds their clothes differently. They start talking about home in hypothetical terms. If she's still alive, or maybe the tavern's still there. You join in, but you don't mean it. Your stories are quiet lies you tell yourself, so you won't admit that you're scared to return. Because the sea was terrible, yes, but it was honest. It showed you everything, and you learned to live with it. What waits on land is uncertain. Expectations, questions, versions of you that never got on the ship. One morning, after a night of uneasy dreams filled with dripping stone and voices you don't understand, you climb on deck and see it. The coast. Faint, fragile, real. It looks smaller than you remember. Less magical, more human. There are buildings, smoke, flags, a port that bristles with ships you can't name. A gull screams overhead, and you flinch. The last time you heard that sound, you hadn't lost your shoes, your innocence, or your best friend to the waves. The ship pulls in slowly. Ropes are thrown. Voices shout in a language you do understand. Too loud, too fast. You grip the rail, staring at the dock like it's a painting hung in someone else's home. The captain disembarks first, then the officers, then the rest in waves. You near the back. You don't rush. You're not sure you want to. But when your foot finally hits solid earth again, the world tilts. The ground moves, not because it's unstable, but because you are. You become so used to shifting that stillness feels wrong. You walk like a drunk. You breathe like a stranger. The sounds are overwhelming. Horses, bells, footsteps, laughter, hammers, wind through alleyways. Everything is sharp-edged and immediate. You long for the quiet menace of the sea. Here's a widely accepted historical fact. Many sailors in the age of exploration return home only to find they no longer belong there. Their towns had changed. Their families had moved on. Their bodies were different. Their minds more so. But here's something lesser known. Some of them left again, not because they loved the ocean, but because it was the only place that made sense anymore. The land was too loud, too solid, too full of people who hadn't seen what they'd seen. You think about this as you pass through the streets, watching women hang laundry and children run barefoot through puddles. No one looks at you twice. You're just another face, weathered and weary. You reach what used to be your home. The door is different. The windows are newer. A child answers your knock and doesn't know your name. You walk away. You don't cry. You don't get angry. You just keep walking because that's what you know how to do. You find work on the docks, carrying barrels, patching sails, listening to other sailors tell half-true stories about places you actually visited. You never correct them. It's easier to let people believe in ghosts and gold than to explain the fog, the sickness, the silence. You eat simply, sleep lightly. You keep a small knife under your pillow, even though you're on land. You develop a habit of glancing over your shoulder every time you hear gulls. At night, you wake up swearing the room is tilting. Sometimes you walk to the edge of the harbor and just stand there, watching the waves. Not with longing, not with fear, just with recognition. That's your old enemy, your old friend, your mirror. You think about getting on another ship. You even talk to a few captains, but something in you hesitates. Not because you can't do it again, but because part of you never left. Historians still wonder what happened to many sailors who vanished from the records after returning home. Some died forgotten. Some reinvented themselves. Some disappeared into the sea again. You suspect most just try to live. Quietly. Anonymously. But the sea doesn't let you go entirely. It's in your skin now. Your dreams. Your rhythms. You hear it in the scrape of boots on cobblestones, in the flap of laundry on a windy day, in the way your body still leans slightly to counter a wave that isn't there. And one evening, as the sun sinks and the wind picks up, you find yourself walking back to the docks. Just to see, just to remember, just to listen. And now, the sails are furled, the sea is quiet, and you are home in a way. Maybe not the one you left. Maybe not the one you dreamed about during sleepless nights and endless storms. But a home made of silence, a breath, of knowing you survived something few people ever will. You can rest now. The journey is behind you. The salt has softened, the bruises have faded, and the ghosts, those strange whispers from jungle ruins and fog-bound decks, have grown quiet for the night. You've earned this stillness. Close your eyes. Picture a calm sea just before dawn. The kind of still water that glows with the reflection of stars, holding the sky in its arms. The ship rests gently on it, unmoving, as if time itself has paused. You lie on the upper deck, wrapped in a warm blanket, the wooden boards beneath you solid and comforting. And then the fog returns. Not like before. Not ocean fog, but land fog. Heavy, white, choking. It rolls in from the treeline and does not recede. You move through it in slow motion, voices muffled, torches useless. The path to the beach is gone. The sound of the sea disappears. You realize the jungle is closing in, not physically, but perceptually. Every step forward feels like circling back. Someone suggests climbing a tree for a better view. But the moment he's out of sight, he stops responding. You find his boot later, still warm. You stop calling names after that. The island wants you confused, and it's winning. Historians still debate the nature of such disappearances. Were they accidents? Attacks? Madness? Or something else? The reports, when they survive, are vague. Crew lost in strange weather. Unmapped island proved hostile. But what you feel here doesn't belong in a report. It belongs in a whisper, in a warning passed from one sailor to another. Don't land where the birds don't sing. Don't linger where the forest is quiet. You try to remember who said that, but your thoughts are molasses. Your memories blur. You dream of circles now, stone ones, ink ones, glowing ones. You stop asking if you're asleep. It doesn't matter. Eventually, the fog begins to lift. Not fast, not entirely, just enough to show the sea again. The ship is there, still intact, still waiting. A few longboats are found, miraculously untouched. You don't question how. You just run. You row without speaking, eyes fixed on the ship like it's a lighthouse in a storm of forgetting. The captain hauls you aboard with hands that shake. The sails are raised before the last man even touches deck. And then the island is behind you, swallowed once more in mist. You do not mark it on the charts. You do not speak its name, if it ever had one. You just sail. And this time, no one celebrates. The ocean doesn't feel freeing. It feels normal, like falling back into a nightmare you at least understand. You walk the deck like a man released from spell, but part of you stay behind. You feel it, in your spine, in your teeth, in the way your dreams, now in with water seeping up through the floorboards. The crew avoids your eyes. You all carry something you didn't have before, not gold, not treasure, but a pause in your thoughts. A moment you don't speak of, a silence that will follow you long after you reach home. If home is still a place that remembers you. You've crossed half the world by now, or maybe more, maybe less, since time has lost meaning out here, stretched and twisted by storms and sun and fear and fog. So the days fold over each other like poorly kept maps, and you stopped asking how long it's been since you first stepped aboard. The sails are frayed, the wood is warped, the men are fewer, but still the ship presses on, pulled by the promise of something. Not treasure, not glory, not even land anymore, but just an end. You feel it in the way the wind has steadied, the way the crew has gone quiet, the way the stars have returned in familiar shapes overhead, constellations you haven't seen since the early days, back when you still believed in fresh starts. The ocean, too, has changed. It's calmer now, but not in a peaceful way. It's more like a hell breath. The waves are smaller, the surface glassy. You don't trust it. You've learned not to trust anything that's too still. But you also don't resist it, because resistance is a kind of arrogance, and the sea has punished that before. So you move with it, quiet and alert, like a cat passing through tall grass, knowing something's watching but not sure what. The ship groans like an old priest whispering secrets to the wind. Below deck, everything creaks in rhythm, as if the wood itself is tired of holding everyone up. You lie in your hammock at night, swaying with the hull, and wonder, really wonder, if this is what you are now. A sailor, a shadow, a soul half swallowed by salt and distance. There's a rumor again, this time about returning. One of the officers mentions it quietly during a chart review. They've turned the heading toward familiar shores. The word spreads, not like a cheer, but like a question. Home? The thought makes your stomach twist. Because what does home even mean now? You've been gone so long that you no longer remember the details of the streets you grew up on. The smell of the bakery. The rhythm of market bells. You can't picture your mother's face clearly anymore. Just pieces. The slope of her nose. The way she scolded with her eyebrows. Even your name, when spoken by someone else, sounds foreign. Like it belongs to someone who died months ago. And maybe he did. Maybe you're just what's left. Still, the ship turns. The stars guide you. And the closer you get to land, the more everything changes again. Not quickly, but like ink seeping into paper. The crew shaves, scrubs, folds their clothes differently. They start talking about home in hypothetical terms. If she's still alive, or maybe the tavern's still there. You join in, but you don't mean it. Your stories are quiet lies you tell yourself, so you won't admit that you're scared to return. Because the sea was terrible, yes, but it was honest. It showed you everything, and you learned to live with it. What waits on land is uncertain. Expectations, questions, versions of you that never got on the ship. One morning, After a night of uneasy dreams filled with dripping stone and voices you don't understand, you climb on deck and see it, the coast. Faint, fragile, real. It looks smaller than you remember, less magical, more human. There are buildings, smoke, flags, a port that bristles with ships you can't name. A gull screams overhead, and you flinch. The last time you heard that sound, you hadn't lost your shoes, your innocence, or your best friend to the waves. The ship pulls in slowly. Ropes are thrown. Voices shout in a language you do understand. Too loud, too fast. You grip the rail, staring at the dock like it's a painting hung in someone else's home. The captain disembarks first, then the officers, then the rest in waves. You near the back. You don't rush. You're not sure you want to. But when your foot finally hits solid earth again, the world tilts. The ground moves, not because it's unstable, but because you become so used to shifting that stillness feels wrong. You walk like a drunk. You breathe like a stranger. The sounds are overwhelming. Horses, bells, footsteps, laughter, hammers, wind through alleyways. Everything is sharp-edged and immediate. You long for the quiet menace of the sea. Here's a widely accepted historical fact. Many sailors in the age of exploration returned home only to find they no longer belonged there. Their towns had changed. Their families had moved on. Their bodies were different. Their minds more so. But here's something lesser known. Some of them left again, not because they loved the ocean, but because it was the only place that made sense anymore. The land was too loud, too solid, too full of people who hadn't seen what they'd seen. You think about this as you pass through the streets, watching women hang laundry and children run barefoot through puddles. No one looks at you twice. You're just another face, weathered and weary. You reach what used to be your home. The door is different. The windows are newer. A child answers your knock and doesn't know your name. You walk away. You don't cry. You don't get angry. You just keep walking because that's what you know how to do. You find work on the docks, carrying barrels, patching sails, listening to other sailors tell half-true stories about places you actually visited. You never correct them. It's easier to let people believe in ghosts and gold than to explain the fog, the sickness, the silence. You eat simply, sleep lightly. You keep a small knife under your pillow, even though you're on land. You develop a habit of glancing over your shoulder every time you hear gulls. At night, you wake up swearing the room is tilting. Sometimes you walk to the edge of the harbor and just stand there, watching the waves. Not with longing, not with fear, just with recognition. That's your old enemy, your old friend, your mirror. You think about getting on another ship. You even talk to a few captains, but something in you hesitates. Not because you can't do it again, but because part of you never left. Historians still wonder what happened to many sailors who vanished from the records after returning home. Some died forgotten. Some reinvented themselves. Some disappeared into the sea again. You suspect most just try to live. Quietly. Anonymously. But the sea doesn't let you go entirely. It's in your skin now. Your dreams. Your rhythms. You hear it in the scrape of boots on cobblestones, in the flap of laundry on a windy day, in the way your body still leans slightly to counter a wave that isn't there. And one evening, as the sun sinks and the wind picks up, you find yourself walking back to the docks. Just to see, just to remember, just to listen. And now, the sails are furled, the sea is quiet, and you are home in a way. Maybe not the one you left. Maybe not the one you dreamed about during sleepless nights and endless storms. But a home made of silence. A breath. Of knowing you survived something few people ever will. You can rest now. The journey is behind you. The salt has softened. The bruises have faded. And the ghosts, those strange whispers from jungle ruins and fog-bound decks, have grown quiet for the night. You've earned this stillness. Close your eyes. Picture a calm sea just before dawn. The kind of still water that glows with the reflection of stars, holding the sky in its arms. The ship rests gently on it, unmoving, as if time itself has paused. You lie on the upper deck, wrapped in a warm blanket, the wooden boards beneath you solid and comforting. Above you, the sails flutter ever so faintly, like a lullaby hummed just out of reach. No more shouting, no more storms, just the soft creak of ropes, the hush of waves brushing the hull, and the quiet rhythm of your own breath. In and out, in and out. The air is cool and carries the scent of salt and pine. Somewhere in the distance, a gull cries, lonely but not urgent. You're safe here. Your body is light, your limbs soft, each muscle relaxing, as if gravity is gently pulling you down into the hammock of the world. Every memory is fading now, not lost but quieted. No need to remember how cold the rain was or how endless the fog felt. That part of the story is done. What remains is warmth, stillness, the kind of peace only found after surviving a long voyage, when a land is steady beneath your feet and the stars begin to blink you to sleep. Let go. Let your thoughts drift like petals on calm water. The world can wait. Right now, you're just floating free and finally at rest.